Well, welcome back. Over the last few sessions, I've done my best to share some of my experiences and my knowledge with regards to the whole concept and the whole issue of body count. What I would like to do is, in today's session, expand on some of those issues in a more tangible way. I've talked about the risks of having a high body count. Now, for men, generally speaking, it's a very, very hard path to navigate. You've heard me say that if you are in the dating marketplace, you are unmarried and single, it makes very little difference to you as a man what a woman's body count is, other than from the position of being cautious. But in any case, the higher the body count, the better for us as men if you are just looking for sex and dating. If you are in what I call the relationship and marketplace, looking for something more serious, something more significant, perhaps anticipating that you are hoping to choose a life partner, someone who could be a mother, someone who you could have the highest possibility and probability of success long term, then the issue of a high body count becomes a lot more concerning, and therefore is something you should take very, very seriously. The question, however, that I didn't address in the prior sessions is, for a younger person, for a younger man who hasn't had, let me use the word, the wealth of experience in knowing how to deal with such issues, how do you navigate some of those issues and still find the answers you're looking for? Well, from my experience, it's very hard. Except someone was providing the information voluntarily, it's hard to know. A few things come to mind. Number one, I remember growing up, you would go into the confession box and say, "Father, forgive me, for I have sinned." And you would confess your sins. Now, except you were behind the curtain on the other side of the confession box and listening to the woman tell you what her body count is and how many men she has been with, there is almost no way of knowing. So the real number will be between her conscience, the devil, and God, if she believes in one. But in any case, if you were a priest, you might find out. The second way would be in a legal setting, if someone was swearing under oath. And therefore, hand on Bible, you can make the person answer the question. The third is if you ask. Now, we all know that there's a level of stigma that comes with a high body count, and therefore most women tend to significantly reduce their true number in order to be accepted socially. Now, you can see the dilemma in actually getting to the true number. Now, what this means is that you have to look for other ways of obtaining that information. My experience has been that there are 4 things to keep in mind and ways through which you can come to an understanding of what you believe that could be. Now, you may never get the true answer, but my experience has shown that if you draw a best fit line through these 4 areas, you get a good sense, a hunch, which is good enough. The first is questions. You can ask direct questions. The second is that you can observe. You can simply sit back and observe people. behaviors, mannerisms, decorum, how they speak. You can observe as to how other people perceive them. The third is you can make inferences through subtle gestures, behaviors. You can extrapolate those inferences into a conclusion. And number four is through the person's actions. But you have to combine all of the four in order to make sure that your conclusions are legitimately accurate. What I will do today and in today's session is I'm going to go through some questions that could be asked, that you could ask. Now these questions can be used on both sexes. So a man, if you have an interest in a woman, and I should say that these are not questions you start asking on the first date. They tend to come with a judgmental and an inquisitive, curious slant, and most people will be cautious about what they share with you on day one. You can ask these questions if you've taken some time to communicate with the person, understand them slightly, and therefore they feel safe. Or you can even ask this on the first date. It just depends on how the rapport goes. So take these as they come. Number one, when did she lose her virginity? Now, that is a casual conversation to have. Anybody can ask that question. The key to that question is as follows. In the UK, the age of consent is 16 years. I generally prefer to use 18 years as the benchmark, at which point we both, men and women, are adults, and we are responsible adults, recognizing that we have responsibilities and there are consequences to our decisions. The date or the period or the year when she lost her virginity tells you a huge amount that you need to know. If that number is south of 16, which is the age of consent, then she is a H. She has a high body count. These days you have young girls having sex at 12 and 13. By the time they get to 18, some of these girls have body counts in the double digits. That's just unbelievable. She would go into the category of leisure and recreational use and fun, nothing more. Number two, at what age, recognizing that the first question will set up the second question, at what age did she have her first long-term relationship and what was the duration? Now let me piece the two questions together. If she lost her virginity at 16 and her first long-term relationship started at 16 and that relationship lasted for 4 years, then it would mean that she had only one lover between 16 and 20. Automatically what you find is that women who lose their virginity late and who have had longer long-term relationships with durations of above 2 years at the minimum, and who have had more long-term relationships than they have had casual relationships, tend to have lower body counts. To make it more concrete, a woman who is 25 who says, I've only dated 3 men in my life. The first I lost my virginity to at 18. The second I started dating when I was 20. So first relationship was 2 years and I was in that relationship until 24. The second or the third is my current relationship, or was the person I dated last and I was there for 1 year. The 3 relationships mean she has 3 body counts, providing she was faithful. Question number 3, and I should apologize that I might forget some of these questions. It's that time of the evening, time to go out, so I might just mix up the numbering. Number three, had she been faithful and committed to those relationships? And did she ever cheat? Now, if the answer is yes to the last question I asked, she's 25, she's only had 3 relationships. They've all been almost long-term, by that meaning, almost 2 years and above. And she's been faithful. She's been in a mono relationship since she was 18. Her body count is 3. Very easy. Number 4, what is her travel experience? And travel experience, I mean travel without family and without loved ones. If she has been to several states, and by travel experience, I mean nationally and internationally. The more she's been traveled out of her state or city or village or town, the higher the likelihood her body count is above average. The more she's been to international cities, the more she's been on a gap year, for example. If she's taken out a 1-year gap year and traveled the world, it's high. Number 5, what is her relationship with her father? Does she speak highly of her father? Was her father in her life, particularly between the age of 7 and 18? If the answer is no, she has a high body count by default. You also want to understand the circumstances. Father died, father left, father and mother divorced, never knew her father. These circumstances create very, very challenging psychological issues for women. We call it daddy issues. Now, men have the same issues, by the way, but it simply means that most young girls who were raised without father, never got to play with father, never got to rough and tumble play, are always seeking for father in a man. And they're looking for the affirmation, the validation, the recognition of a man. And unfortunately, foreplay is where they seem to find that pursuit of father leads them to. So her relationship with the father, very important. And that does not mean that if she didn't have a good relationship with her father, that she may not be an exception to the rule. There are always exceptions to the rules, but the exception proves the rule. It does not disprove the rule. Number 6, where does she live? Where was she raised? Based on her location where she was raised between the age of, say, 12 and 25, that will give you an insight to her sexual past. You have to adjust her location to population. So, for example, if she was raised or she grew up in a small town, say Inverness or Stirling, or if she was raised in a place such as Dorset, or she was raised in a place, let's say, I'm thinking of a very small community, town, village. The size of the location would mean that it's a smaller community. Perhaps they have 2 or 3 pubs. They have 1 nightclub in the city centre. As a matter of fact, maybe there is 1 city centre where everyone goes to, with a few restaurants on the same block. The lower the likelihood that she's going to be a hoe. Why? Because everyone gets to see you, and you'll be labelled as the village bicycle. As a matter of fact, most men would not want to be seen around with you, other than either exiting your house or you exiting their cars. So where she lives plays a huge part. Always adjust for population. If she lives in London, you can be in London and live in the north of the River Thames. and be there for 10 years, and you've almost never had people you know see you during social endeavors. It's so big. There are so many small town squares and places to go to. You can go south of the river, so many clubs to go to, so many night bars, so many pubs, so many locations, so many hotels. People tend to live in apartments rather than houses, so you can arrive at someone's house and no one knows who you're going to see because it's an apartment complex. It's a block of flats. London has so many people. So people can disguise their night duties. So where she lives plays a huge role. Now number 7, what did she study? Now this might seem bizarre, but it makes a difference. What did she study in college, university, and did she attend university or college? If she did attend university or college, there's a high likelihood that she has a high body count. The location of the university or college plays a role. The size of the university or college plays a role. The bigger, the more the likelihood that she is going to have a higher body count than others. Very important. The reason being that universities tend to have a lot of people. Freshman years, when you arrive, you're free. It's the first time at 18 you've left home. People go hard. It takes about 2 years for women to catch up to the fact that, well, the body keeps the score. And so the smaller the school is, the less the likelihood that there'll be so much partying and orgies and threesomes and swingers places and bars. The bigger the school is, the more likely that would happen. It's the law of large numbers. She'll always find someone who she finds attractive in any school, but the more there are men, the more likely she might find a few people who tick her box. Now, here's where we start to get a little bit more intimate and more intrusive. Question: are you on the pill? And how long have you been on the pill for? Here's the key to that question. Women who are very sexually active do not take the risk of relying on just condoms. Those who are very sexually active and who do not want to have babies always tend to be on the pill. Despite the disadvantages of being on the pill. And what that means is that you find that sane women would do anything to be on the pill because condoms break, and someone who's very active sexually recognizes that the risk is too high. Now, if she says, yes, I've been on the pill since I've been 16 or 14, she has a very high body count. And understand that for people who are not sexually active regularly, it's very easy to slip and not take the pill on a particular day, because you have to take them every single day. And if she misses a pill, it invalidates and removes the protection that she's afforded by that protection. The protection has to be consistently done. Now, let's move to number 8, whatever the number is. What does she do? If she's a student, much higher likelihood of being a H and having a high body count. Because most of the time, now I remember my days of being in uni, sometimes all you do is just sit back and smoke pot and have a good time and have drinks. Go to parties, just lounging. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. That's when you get invited to parties and events and you get invited to do things. If she works, most people who work from 9 till 5, they have a limited amount of time for running around. You wake up at 7 or 6:30 to get to work for 9. You finish work at 5 to get home for 7. Monday till Thursday, most people are tired. The weekends is when the party happens. So, unlike students, where every day is a Friday, every day is a Saturday, every day is a Sunday, the law of large numbers comes into play again. You have 7 days in a week to get laid. People who work sometimes only have 2 days in a week to get laid. So it's a slightly different dynamics. Now, what she does if she works plays a part as well, because, for example, this is my theory. I actually believe that women who study STEM or who come from the STEM field tend to have lower body counts than women who have done other careers for a number of reasons. Science, engineering, science, technology, engineering, math means that you are generally around men. So the mystery of men and the pedestal that most women will place men in is reduced because you're always around men. Men that are attractive, smart, ambitious, intelligent. And what tends to happen is the more you spend time around intelligent, successful men, the more a woman starts to raise her bar. Women who are in STEM are usually intelligent women. They understand how to think using logic, inductively, deductively. They understand science. So sex for such women has to meet a number of very specific criteria. It's not just about feelings. She understands because she's been taught the scientific method. And accounting, I should have included things such as accounting and law. These are people who are more likely to ask questions and probe and make sure they're getting a good return for their investment. They think in cost-benefit terms. Most of these women, because they've been in a masculine environment, tend to be very, very shrewd in understanding the good, the bad, and the ugly. They can spot playboys much better than women who've done the liberal arts, who for the entire educational time frame have been around women, have gone to universities where there are women, have moved into work for companies in departments surrounded by women. So when they come around men, there is this excitement. They can't control themselves. STEM field women, women who've been taught accounting and law, are always around men. So find out what she, in this particular case, find out what she does, and whether she's in STEM. Women who are or who work in the entertainment industry, like night bars, bottle girls, people who work in areas like administration, who are client-facing, customer-facing, sales. They get opportunities from men thrown at them on a daily basis. Now, let's go to the next one, which is, say, number 9 or number 8, whatever. Her travel experience. Now, I talked about that previously, but her experiences. Questions such as, where was the most exciting place you went to? When was it? Was it during your gap year? Was it with friends or was it with family? What part of that experience stands out to you? Another question, number 10, would be her religious faith. Does she have one? Those who believe in Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, with Christianity being at the bottom, tend to be more reserved. Sometimes it's Islam, Judaism, Christianity. Christianity has fallen so way down the list for several reasons. We have decided that the doctrine of grace and love and peace and forgiveness is more important than fire and brimstone. Christianity focuses more on, the New Testament and all that all you need is love, and they've ignored all of the commandments. The 600 plus commandments from the Old Testament have been shunned and put aside. The more the person has a religious faith position, the higher the likelihood that a person is more reserved. Especially if the person attends church every Sunday, goes to the mosque every week, goes to see her rabbi regularly, does morning devotion. I don't know about you, but I remember being young, my conscience. I've said before that I've done so many things. Hence, I don't tend to focus on morality because I've done everything good, bad, and ugly. Some things done once, some things done twice, some things done multiple times. But the one thing that always stayed with me was my conscience. Waking up on Sunday morning thinking, oh God, I've got to make that confession, in many ways acts as a way of controlling and reserving you from, obviously, my desires most of the time won. But there were times when I actually had to stop and say, well, I really don't like the feeling, recognizing I had to come back at the end of the week and do my confessions. I just didn't like the feeling of returning every week and saying the same thing. Those who are atheists tend to have very good moral standards, and are good people, a good value system. But because there isn't a hierarchy of something at the apex, which is the conscience, and someone who is playing the role of watching what you're doing, I tend to find everything goes for such people compared to other religious leaning people. Any religion that focuses on morality has a way of placing restrictions and standards. It doesn't mean those standards are adhered to, but it means the standards are there. Religions that have those, and the people who were raised from a young age with such values, most of the time in general, tend to be a little bit more reserved, all things being equal. That's a very good word. All things being equal. And number 10, number 11, this is a good one. And I think you can try this. If you're out this evening, if you're partying, I will be, ask her, what is your type? And here's the cue and the clue. Women who say, I don't have a type. I should be careful how I say this. Let me rephrase it. Women who have a specific type by race or ethnicity, orientation, social class, usually have lower body counts than those, all things remaining equal, than those who don't. The reason is simple. A woman who says, I date everyone. I find black men attractive, colored men attractive, Asian, Oriental, white, Caucasian, Hispanic. You're simply saying, I'm open season. And that's a good thing. From a man's perspective, it means that there are more men available to you to choose from and from whom you've chosen from. And therefore, there isn't that much of a discipline in selectivity. Men generally do not have types in women. That is acceptable. Any man who says, I have a type. Now, we have preferences, but attraction for men is the first thing that we judge a woman based on, and we don't care if she's blue or red or indigo or brown. We don't really care. For women, we care more, or rather it matters more, based on selectivity. Remember, a woman pays a higher price for sex because effectively you have 1 year or 9 months during which you have to carry a baby to term. And our biology is very instinctively real. Even when you're sexually active on a casual basis, at the back of your mind, what hits you is, if something goes wrong, is this the man I would want to bring and gift my womb to and bring a baby to term for him? That simply means, at the back of her mind, she's playing the game of odds. I hope this does not go wrong, but if it does, will father, will mother, will my people, will my family accept this? And would I even want this? So it's a very funny dynamics that takes place with regards to types. So if she has open season, doesn't really have a type, there's a high chance that she has a high body count, very high one. If she has a preference, there's a, and if that preference is, let me make it more concrete. In the UK, the ethnicity is distributed roughly as follows: 86% in the UK are white Caucasians. That black population make up roughly 3.5 or 3.7%. But when you include the mixed race, that 3.4 goes up to about 7%. Then you have the Indians and the Asians, very small percentage. Now what this means, that a woman in the UK, recognize that when I talk about Caucasians, I'm including all people of similar ethnic image. But if you adjust for just Anglo-Saxons, that 87% drops to roughly about, maybe give or take, maybe 78%. What that means is that you have people of other races, Europeans, Americans, Anglo-Sax, and particularly amongst Europeans, you have more from the Slavic and the Baltic regions. When you add all those people together, a woman who says, my type only, I only date black men, black British or African born, that means you're looking at a population of about 3.7%. If she says, well, I only date men who are black, black Africans, that number drops to less than 1% in the UK. That means that amongst roughly 34 million men, her standards drop to 1% of that group. That's 300,000 men. It's a small number. If she lives in Sunderland, the likelihood that there are at most maybe 1,000 black men is probably close to, I'd say probably 17%. You might be looking at in Sunderland a much smaller percentage of men, maybe 150 men in total, 170 men. What that simply means that the pool of men is much smaller. So she's more likely to have a lower body count than a woman who says, no, well, it's open season. I don't care if it's rich or poor, tall or short. Again, these are preferences. Whether he has a six-pack, is 6 inches, small dick, big dick. If she says, I don't really care, she has a high body count. Now, I started today's session trying to talk about the questions to ask, to be able to come to a conclusion as to where that woman has a high body count. But one thing I should have said is, which will be question number 11, is how reluctant is she to answer the question about what her body count is? Usually women answer the question in 3 ways. There's a shock that you're asking that question. Those with lower body counts will simply say, it's X. Nothing to hide. Those with much higher body counts, those who've been ran through, those who've been like village bicycles, you will see a hesitation, but the hesitation will be followed by almost a bodily body language that is very defensive, that could be even aggressive and resistant. So the way she answers the question, if there's a hesitation to answering the question, she has a high body count. If she answers the question very quickly and you simply pause and just look at her, like I just did, most people who've lied, you'll see them blink their eyes. You see them say, is that too much? Is that wrong? Or you might hear them say things such as, I'm not lying. I didn't ask, I just looked at you. That means they have a high body count. Remember, you're asking questions. The body gives it away usually. 85% of our communication is body language. Most of what we say only comes down to perhaps 8%. So don't listen to what people say. See whether there's a congruency between what is being said and the body. Now, here are some other questions. Number 12, has she been in a threesome, a sexual encounter? If yes, were there 2 guys or 2 girls? If she says, I've been 2 girls and 1 guy, okay. Question, have you been with 2 guys and just yourself? If the answer is yes, she's a H. Has she been to orgies and parties? If the answer is yes, she's got a high body count. Has she been to swingers clubs? If the answer is yes, she has a high body count. If you put out an invitation to say, would you be up to, would it be something you would consider? And she says, yeah, she has a high body count. If you're with a good friend who is attractive, a male, and you say, would you be up if my friend and I tag team? And she doesn't show a hesitation or a sense of disgust, she's a H. She has a high body count. Now this is just some questions. I'm just thinking, keep in mind that what we're looking for is correlation most of the time. We're trying to look for the best, what we call the best line fit. If you did a regression analysis with all the questions that I've just asked, and the best fit line connect, or the questions connect as close as possible to that line, then what we have is probability numbers that are very high. Is it possible? Is it plausible? Is it probable? Key questions to ask. But I'm thinking about other questions that might come to mind. Here's an interesting one that I used when I was very young. At 19, I wanted to know if and how long she lived at home. Women who left home at 16 or 15, H, high body count, because what it showed was either she was driven out of the home because she was rebellious, either she ran away because she was rebellious, either she came from a broken home and it wasn't safe, in any case daddy issues, or either she decided that she was an adult, had a lot of attention from men, and therefore felt that she could start her life outside her family fast, being supported by the state or supported by other men. If she started working as an independent woman very early, all of those groups of people fall within high risk. So the question could be, when did you leave home? Or how long did you live at home with your parents for? If she says, I left at 18, that's a good sign. If she says, well, I left at 20, a very good sign, because it means she's been under the discipline, the authority, the guidance. She's more likely to have spoken to her father about dating, being guided. Even her dad may have dropped her off. for dates, picked her up from dates, which is you show that relationship where a girl starts to ask questions. Daddy, what do you think? Very, very good point. I mean, those are good marks if a father has been actively involved in her life. If she says, I left home at 20, question could be, go back to where she lives, connected to where her parents live. Where do your parents live? Okay. If parents are close by, that's a good sign. If parents are not too close by, that's also a good sign. Close by means mom and dad can drop by unannounced. Too far means some of your weekends have to be spent with mom and dad. So the next question would be, how regularly do you see your parents? And when you go to visit, do you stay over? Does your dad know about your relationship status and the man in your life? What's he like? The body language and how the answers are put forward, juxtaposed with how the questions are answered, plays a huge role in allowing you, the guy, understand what the potential position could be. Now, those are a lot. I hope they've been useful. I should bring this to a close, but perhaps I'm thinking, I started today's session and I said, questions, inferences, observations, and actions. What I'd like to do is talk about observations and see if it helps. Let me think. An inference is a conclusion you draw from information that has been given to you. So the questions have been given to you, some willingly and others reluctantly. You can draw an inference. But before you draw your inference, try step 2, which is observations. Just observe what you see. How does she dress? Usually, the more a woman dresses more provocatively, the more sensual and sexy, she has a high body count. The reason being is the agency women have really is their sexuality. A woman who puts it out there constantly is simply signaling to the person across that this is on the table and it will go to the highest bidder. Observation. So observe how she dresses. Number 2, her level of attractiveness. Contrary to what people think, women who are more attractive are easier to have sex with than women who are less attractive. Women who are 9s and 10s, in my experience and my opinion, have daddy issues, have self-image issues. They have very low self-esteem, primarily because you're almost close to perfection, and therefore any error that is noticed, either by observation from other people, is magnified in their eyes. This is why those who are anorexic tend to be the people who you'll be thinking, I don't understand why you're anorexic, because you don't have the risk of being overweight. But these are people who take it to the extreme. Women who are 9s and 10s generally have much higher body counts than women who are 7. So 8, 9, 10s, higher body count, just by default. Those who are 7s tend to have lower body counts within reason. Women who are 6, 5 and 6, so average and 6, tend to have similar body counts to those who are 9s and 10s. 7 is usually the safe number. Why? Because those who are 5 and 6 and who are average, they don't get a lot of interests. So they have to overcompensate education, work, their wealth, their money, their accomplishments. They put themselves out there for men to choose from. You go into a bar and there are 10 men, 9 of them wants the most attractive women. And then it becomes a competition between those men So the victor goes the spoils. But what tends to happen is the women are also interested in the attractive men, especially the lower ranking women. So they will step forward, introduce themselves, talk about what they do, and they'll be willing to give sex just to be able to say, you know what, I have him or I had him. So keep in mind, level of attractiveness plays a part. The more attractive she is, the higher her body count. And usually the much higher that started very young. Women who were very attractive from the age 14, 15, already have men waiting for them. Men who've been gifting them with items, waiting for 16 so that they can actually cash in. So you find some of these women start having sex very young and have very high body counts. Another observation would be her decorum. How does she carry herself? How does she speak? Table manners. How does she sit? How does she walk? General behavior is very important. Now, one of the key things is in a social setting, her flirtation, style, and boundaries. If she flirts a lot, if you can poke her and she's receptive to all of those, there's always a useful indication that you can push her boundaries. And if you can push her boundaries, those boundaries are not very secure, which means all it takes is the right environment. So when I talk about decorum and behavior, I'm talking about how people carry themselves. If she drinks a lot, high body count. Another question I should have said would be, how regularly, how often she goes out to party. Those who like to party, high body count. A woman who can hold her drink tends to be more reserved. A woman who cannot hold her drink, they're usually the ones who start by saying no. After the first cocktail, she says, I'll think about it, but not tonight. After the second one, she says, maybe. After the third one, she says, where do we go? I'm sorry, girls, I'm just giving out the game. In terms of observations, let's say number 4. If she's dressed in a way that you can see part of her skin, pay attention to a few things. Does she have tattoos? The presence of tattoos generally means she doesn't have much regard for her body. Doesn't think that her body's a temple. Quite happy to put marks and things on her body. Does this always apply? No, but generally, yes. Those who have tattoos generally have daddy issues. They have issues with boundaries, issues with delayed gratification, issues with discipline, issues with wanting to express themselves because they're not self-contained. Self-reassurance is not something they have. So, high body count. If they have a lot of piercings in the wrong places, nose job, nose, lips, mouth, teeth, tongue, belly button, high body count. I'm just thinking, observations to make. Number 5 or number 6. Her feminist leanings. A woman who is more feminist in her mannerisms, especially feminists from the position of equality in the sexual marketplace, is more likely to have a high body count. She's the one who doesn't want to be shamed. She doesn't believe in traditional gender roles. She doesn't believe in a woman's purity, chastity. She believes, I'm half a man. I should be able to do the same things men do. I live in the West. I don't believe in double standards, because she doesn't want to be judged. The virtues that make women women, she doesn't find those virtues, apart from those that benefit her. She prefers the virtues that benefit men also, with the standards that she likes as a woman. So the more she's feminist in her leanings, but not feminists from an academic point of view. Remember, feminists who are attractive, high body count. Feminists who are average, low body count, because they want to act like men, and that just generally men don't find it attractive. I'm just thinking. Observations. Number 7. Enhancements. Physical enhancements. Nose job. Botox. Surgeries. BBL. Boob jobs. Tummy tuck. These are women with very insecure self-identities and self-image who've gone to the extent of carrying out enhancements to improve their looks so that they can compete in the sexual marketplace. Generally speaking, you tend to find, on average, those who are 6'7s are the ones who do this to compete. Those who are 7s are usually okay. Those who are 8 and 9s also fall within this category. But here is the key thing. It's not just the enhancement, it's the dates and timing of the enhancements. So for example, women who are 20 years and below, or 18 years and below, who have already started adopting the artificial lifestyle, makeup, artificial hair, artificial nails, artificial everything, tummy tuck, and everything to enhance their beauty. At 18, it signifies that that insecurity has been there since about 14, and you've been waiting to be an adult to get it done. And you've had bad experiences because you found that men or boys you liked preferred women of a certain type. And you've gone through the process of changing yourself to be accepted. Low self-esteem is a great for guys to pick up chicks. It's a great way to identify women with high body counts. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, yeah, but generally speaking, this is the case. Let's say, in terms of observing, you can observe the person physically. You can also observe the person when they're out of your presence on social media. People with high social media accounts or presence, where they're posting much more nudity, their travel experiences, people who have pages where you see them every other week in a different location, who are young. Remember, there's a correlation between a woman's attractiveness and the likelihood that she will be invited and paid for by a man to exotic locations. Men don't do that for free. We want something in exchange. We'll fly you out, we'll buy you things, we'll give you experiences, hoping that you spread your cheeks eventually. The more you see this, the more likelihood high body count. I should make it very clear that in Europe, you have to take that with some careful thought process, because the free movement of people in Europe meant that you can go from France to Spain, to Belgium, to Bulgaria, so freely and so easily. And it's not quite the same as people who go back to the question I asked about where does she live, where is she located. And if you notice that the pictures are in locations that are on a different continent, very far away, where it's costly to get to, the younger she is and has these experiences, the more likely she has a high body count. If she's on social media and she's on other media sites where that are derivatives of being a porn star, or being a burlesque dancer, or being a stripper, any social media equivalent of that high body count, because you're selling your sexuality in exchange for some form of compensation. Now, so I've given you maybe I'll stop now because I have to go. It's that time of the night. I've given you some of my ways of thinking about these matters. Questions I started with, observations I leaned into. The third was inferences. There isn't much to draw from the position of inference other than saying, if it moves like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it may be a duck. Doesn't have to be, but it may be. And all it takes is one bad apple to ruin the whole pack of apples. Some women some other women are guilty by action. It's hard to distinguish both. All you have to do in drawing an inference from all of what you get from the two sections is to draw a conclusion. Your conclusion doesn't have to be 100% right. Remember, it's better to be imprecise in your analysis and lean towards accuracy rather than to say, well, I can't draw a conclusion. Draw the conclusion and make a decision based on the conclusion. Draw the inferences you can, and when you draw the inferences, don't be naive. I gave you the formula. It's quite simple. A woman's body count should simply be her age less the age of consent divided by 2. Age of consent in the UK is 16. I prefer to use 18 divided by 2. If she's 28, less 18, that gives you 10 divided by 2, that's 5. So at 28, she should have a body count of roughly about 5. And there'll be a tolerance, you can say plus or minus 20%, which would be technically between, say, 4 and who knows, maybe 7. The older she is, the more that number will increase. But the key thing to keep in mind is that calculation is my calculation. Now you can decide, I do not want to divide by 2. I like to just take the age, subtract it from the age of consent, and whatever that number is, that's my guide. More power to you. I don't really care. The point is that if you fall within a margin of plus or minus a few percentage points, that's fine. That's understandable. Some people don't get it lucky on the first time with regards to dating. Some others have terrible experiences and eventually they find the right person. But if that number is coming up, and I generally say this, a woman who is less than 25 years, who has a body count over 20, your age. It's quite simple. You have a high body count. A woman who's 30, at 30, I hate to say this, but you've been through and you've been on the streets much longer and the risk is much higher. And generally speaking, in the dating marketplace, women above 30 are simply for recreational use and leisure. Because most men will say, well, you've wasted your prime years on the streets. Why should I then give you the highest honor? So people will just use you for fun. The point of today's session is to simply say that there is a way of finding out. Be curious, ask questions, make observations, infer, and then watch people's actions. Actions say a lot. And the way people act and behave, what they say, if it's not congruent with what they do, that's a good sign. Now, the one thing I didn't talk about is the one-night stands or having sex on the first meet or the first outing. That's a controversial one because I have met women and I know women who will give it up on the first night, who have very high body counts. And I've known women who have given it up on the first night, but they gave it up to someone who they had spoken to a few times and who they really liked. And they didn't have a higher body count as the other women. So it's a touch and go, but the rule of thumb is if she gives it up on the first night, she has a high body count. The younger she is, the more worrying that should be, because a woman's value decreases with age and time and use. So if she gives up more value at a young age, that could be an issue. I hope that's been useful.